It's time for Solutions for Seniors to Be, here on WATD. Here to help make your golden years golden, offering guidance on programs and services available to you and your loved ones in your retirement. Now, here's your host, Chris Shea.
Good Sunday morning. Gotta love waking up with Dr. John every week. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for listening in. Hopefully you had a wonderful past week. And you're here to get some more education on some of the solutions out there for yourself and for loved ones in case they need it. Again, I'm primarily doing this because of the circumstance around my family, and we'll get into that a little bit because today I've got the pleasure of bringing in a gentleman that I've met through a networking group down in Plymouth that actually we get together and we have solutions for seniors from a lot of different organizations. So I've networked for a lot of different groups. And Michael Cruza, he is a vice president of business development for the Old Colony Hospice and Palliative Care. And he and I were talking because, well, people hear the words hospice and palliative care and tend to freak out because there's beliefs about what they mean. And usually when there's beliefs about what something means, it's partially true. And for me, in my situation, I know that I was misinformed before I became informed. So hopefully Michael can shed some light on what all this stuff means and some of the options that people have as they enter some of these stages. So Michael, before we get into any of that, what's your background? Tell us about the Old Colony Hospice and Palliative Care a little bit at a high level, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I've personally been with Old Colony Hospice for 14 years and in hospice care in general for about 19, almost 20 years. So I've seen a lot of this, and the reason I really got into it was I'd had people in my family that have passed away with and without hospice care. And then there was an opportunity that came up. I had worked in a lot of medical fields in the past, but then an opportunity came up to learn a little bit more about how to be a advocate in the community for hospice services. And I kind of jumped on it and really found my thing. So one of the major things I like to do is really get out there and dispel some of those myths, as you kind of referred to. It's there's a lot of baggage, mostly negative, that comes along with hospice.
No, all negative.
All negative.
Let's make that clear. People hear that word,
right,
and they freak out.
Yeah, and unless you've got somebody who's had a recent experience and it was positive, and most often it is positive experience in the end. It's got a negative background to it, but it's something I love to talk about, and I think it'll probably come across over the next little bit.
Yeah. So hospice always brings about the end of life conversations. When people think about that, I know for me, before I became a little educated about it, I always thought it was, and this just happened to be the case with my mother. She was in the hospital. She was non-responsive. She didn't participate. And so with a couple weeks left in her life, they're like, look, hospice care is the best care. So to me, it was like hospice meant immediate passing away.
Right.
What I've learned, though, is that may not always be the case. Right. So can you shed some light on that a little bit?
Yeah, what you kind of said at the beginning was true. People mostly think about hospice and they say that the first two words that come to mind are death and dying. What you don't think about and what we really like to promote is that it's all about living. And till the very end, however long you have. That's what we want to do. We want to make sure that we focus on three major things. It's comfort, quality of life, and dignity. And once you can manage those things, people start to hang on a little bit longer. And they've actually done a handful of studies over the last maybe about 10 years or so, a little more. But 3 major studies have come out that if you take folks who have the same prognosis and diagnosis, and you have half that group receives hospice care, and half of that group does not receive hospice care, the group that actually had hospice care on average lives 29 days longer on average. So the old adage of, I don't want mom or dad to go on to hospice because I'm not ready for them to die, you actually want to promote hospice because you're actually going to get probably a little bit more length of life. And it's because we focus on those 3 things that I talked about: comfort, quality of life, and dignity. And it turns out when you focus on those things, you're less likely to go to the hospital. We tell people all the time that a hospital is no place for sick people.
No.
And if you think about somebody who's got advanced progressive disease, whether it's COPD, CHF, an advanced neurological like Alzheimer's, liver disease, kidney disease, keeping someone out of the emergency room and out of the ICU does a tremendous amount for length of life. When you're at home, surrounded by family, your pets, presets, all the usual noises that won't keep you up at night, those are things that are a recipe for length of life. And when you're home and comfortable, you'll stick around.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen is that people need a reason to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if you're in a hospital and you got visitors once every 3 or 4 days,
Yeah, it's tough.
It's not good for the individuals that are going through it. It's also not good for the family members because of the added stress. And I know, and I have a lot of people that work in the medical profession, a lot of cousins that are in the nursing profession. They're not there to treat people that are healthy. They're there to treat the people that are, there's an issue right now, we've got to get it taken care of. And we have to triage them to get them out of here. They don't want people hanging on in the hospital.
Right. Well, what you're really kind of digging at there is when someone's in the hospital, they're treating the disease. They're treating the symptoms. They're trying to alleviate what brought you to the hospital and then get you out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Where hospice care is is only in palliative, so it's really only focused about comfort, quality of life, dignity, those types of things. We're not really looking to cure disease, but keep people comfortable with whatever disease they have. So we are laser focused in on making sure people are comfortable, so they can have those conversations with family members that do stop by, that they can participate in the life that they have left. I mean, we all have a definite amount of time on the earth. We don't know how long it is, but it's not infinite, right?
Right.
So we want to make the best. And when someone is towards the end of life, it becomes increasingly more focused that you make the best of those days left. And when we talk to people and they do national surveys about, where do you want to be when you pass away? And 99% of people say, I want to be at home, wherever that is. Sometimes that's an assisted living, it's a nursing home, residence. Even some people we treat are homeless. But wherever they call home, that's where they want to be. But just under 60% of people actually achieve that goal. I mean, a lot of people still do die in hospitals from their progressive disease. And if you think about a progressive disease, there's no reason, if we don't manage it properly, that we should have closer to 99% of those people making their wishes, achieve their goals of passing away at home.
Yeah, my father, he had broken his hip on one side and his elbow on the other side, and he just had to be in the hospital, and because he had pneumonia progressing, and at the end it was just, he was kept alive with machines. There was no option because of the nature of his diseases. My mom in COVID, same type of thing. She went in the hospital, went to the next stage of care, and she didn't participate. So she, I actually talked to the hospice people, and they were like, look, she's at a stage where it'd be inhumane to bring her home because I couldn't give her the care that the hospice people could provide
Yeah.
and the quality of life. And it was COVID, and it was just a disaster all around. But you mentioned the word palliative.
Mm-hmm.
When I was going through this, I had no idea what palliative is. What is the difference between palliative and hospice? Because your title is Old Colony Hospice and Palliative Care.
Right.
We talked a little bit about hospice. What is palliative care?
Well, so palliative care is really just the if you think about hospice as an intensive, you've got round-the-clock coverage at home. You've got nurses, social workers, chaplains, and we could probably talk about, everyone who's on the team, for an hour. But there's access around the clock and daily visits that come with having hospice care. Palliative care is really more of a consultation visit. So in the same philosophy, you'd have comfort, quality of life, dignity, laser focused in, but it's only on a consultation basis. So palliative care nurse practitioners would visit patients, again, wherever they live, just like with hospice, and they would focus in on comfort and quality of life, but it's limited in that it's only a visit maybe once a month, once every 4 to 6 weeks, to look at what's happening with your advanced progressive disease, making recommendations around what might happen next with the disease process. So that way, when that symptom pops up or gets worse, instead of hitting 911 necessarily, we'll know how to handle it at home, so you don't necessarily have to go back into the hospital system and get the big workup. It's if you have the choice between getting hospice and palliative care, hospice obviously offers a lot more for people who are towards the end of life, meaning the last 6 months. But palliative care can happen at any point of the disease process. So we have people who are on palliative care who aren't going anywhere for years with their disease process as far as end of life. So they could be on palliative care for years, getting those consultations. And the good news is with palliative care is you don't lose your other team members. So you don't lose if you're seeing an oncologist or a specialist of any sort, or even your primary care physician. You don't lose those people. Palliative care is just an addition to your care team that you currently have. It's just we're focusing in on, you've got these 3 disease processes happening. How do we make you the most comfortable as often as possible until you need something more?
And I think that's an important thing, because diseases, until you've gone through them,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what the next step is. And invariably, people that I've encountered, when things go wrong, their first inclination is 911.
Mm-hmm.
I need to go to the emergency room, as opposed to someone who, when they have a little bit more knowledge and foresight into something, can say, okay, this is a normal progress in the process of what we're going to be going through, because we know that we have this diagnosis for whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be prepared to manage it. Let's have things in place so that we can manage it effectively and not have to go through the traumatic experience of rushing to the hospital. Right. Sitting in that waiting room for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours.
Sometimes in the hallway.
Yes. In a very much discomfortable situation, just to be told the same thing you could have been told 3 weeks ago.
Right.
Right. And again, that speaks to the quality of life that you talked about at the beginning of like, hey, look, this is about living the best life you can for as long as you can. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand, is that this is not something where it's designed to be negative, right? But designed to be something where it's like, hey, like let's take your life and celebrate it. And I love the word that you use, dignity, that people want to have towards the end of their life. Yeah,
I mean, I in previous work, I've worked at a hospital when I was going through college, and me and a couple of the young guys, we were the transport people, but we also responded to code blues, right? So if somebody's having a cardiac arrest in the hospital, us young guys, because we were young and strong at the time and had a lot more hair in our heads, we would respond and actually have to do those chest compressions. And so I was responsible for running up there and performing chest compressions. Palliative care also talks about advanced directives. So it's about talking to people about what might happen if you're 89 years old and you need to be resuscitated with chest compressions. What does your quality of life look like after that? What does your comfort look like after that if you survive it? And as someone who's actually had to do those things to people who didn't have their advanced directives in place, and some of them were, over 90 years old, to do chest compressions on somebody whose, bones are brittle to begin with, there's no comfort, I can tell you that. It was uncomfortable for me to do it, and there's obviously no comfort for the patient. There's limited quality of life after receiving those things, and dignity is not even acknowledged because you've got somebody there, because then you have to take the Johnny off because you need to get some of those, the defibrillator out, and that's going to be right on skin. So you've got a 90-year-old bare-chested woman getting chest compressions with maybe about 10, 14 people around the bedside. So dignity is not something that's considered at all when we're trying to acutely save somebody's life who may have just passed peacefully if we had talked about living will and advanced directives and how we really want to die comfortably at home. So palliative care can help a lot with having those discussions around how I want to be on my last few days. Do you want to be in the ICU? Do you want to have CPR? Or do you want to be at home, surrounded by your pooch and the fam, looking out the same window, watching the leaves fall? There's definite good ways to die, and there's definitely some not so good, and it all goes into planning, and that's what palliative care can help with. And then once someone can graduate into hospice, that's when we really can focus on it on a day-to-day basis, where palliative is really kind of an every few weeks type of focus.
I do want to get into planning, but we got to take a short break here for our advertisers, so we'll be right back. Are you fit to retire? I'm Chris Shea, financial advisor with BPS Financial Services in Marshfield. I work with clients to create a 100-day plan that can help get you started so that you can get the most out of your retirement. You've worked your whole life towards your goal of retirement. Let BPS Financial Services put together a plan that will help you enjoy your retirement. Find out how a 100-day plan tailored to you can help you get started in your retirement at fit2retire.com/Chris-Shea. Or call 781-733-5996. That's 781-733-5996. And now for my fast red disclosure, as this has been compliance approved.
Chris Shea is a registered representative offering securities and advisory services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA/SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. Cetera is under separate ownership from any other named entity, located at 752 Ocean Street, Marshfield, Massachusetts, 02050.
That's 781-733-5996. All right, well, welcome back. Want to dig in a little bit what you talked about with advanced directives and those tough conversations that people have. Mm-hmm. You can start the conversations, right? But you need to have legal documents actually drawn up for them to fall into place. Do you guys give recommendations on who to go to, or do you guys help guide that process, or you just kind of go, here's a business card?
Well, I mean, so keep in mind with a lot of these things we're talking about, living wills, in Massachusetts, the way that it works is whoever you assign as your healthcare proxy, they're the ones who really execute the living will. So you need to be very, very thorough in who you choose to be your healthcare proxy, because you might discuss with your healthcare proxy what you want to have with, do you want to not hospitalize? Do you want to not resuscitate? Do you want to not intubate? Kind of get those tubes down your throat. So those are things you might select. But if your healthcare proxy thinks you might have been wrong, they can absolutely overrule you. So, I usually say, listen,
that's a mess.
Yeah. So I usually tell people, listen, if you are adamant that you want chocolate ice cream, and then your healthcare proxy decides, no, I think Mike was insane. He wants vanilla. You're getting vanilla, because that's what your healthcare proxy is going to decide on. So it's not necessarily, the healthcare proxy, when it's activated, is kind of a legal document, but the living will in and of itself is something that the healthcare proxy should follow, But if they decide to veer from it in any way, that's up to the healthcare proxy, because they're the ones who are supposed to know what you would want in the event that you can't make those decisions yourself. So it's really, really important to go through those things. There's a few different online options. There's a website called Honoring Choices that has a lot of good links, but also downloadable documents that you can use for a living will, as well as healthcare proxy in all the different states. And then there's another thing that's a little bit more maybe I want to say touchy-feely, where it kind of takes you through a little bit more of a comfortable way. It's called the 5 Wishes, where you can designate your healthcare proxy, but then go through in general what you want to have done to you when you're no longer able to make your decision. So it's almost like a light version of a living will, where it's not as rigid and frankly explicit around what might happen to you. So it's a little bit more light in that way. But there's really, really good resources out there. But the idea is, if you don't use the resources, if you don't get a healthcare proxy squared away, if you don't fill out any type of a live-in will or instructions around your advance directives, you're really just left to people wondering what you might have liked. So it really is one of the biggest gifts that anyone can give, is to let their loved ones know how they want to be treated when they can't speak for themselves. So, my wife and I talk about it all the time, and it's probably a lot of anecdotal stories like, never have that happen to me. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But when you're in crisis and there's something happening with the disease process, it's hard to remember conversations like that. It's hard to think straight. So you really need to have it written out, so you can go to it and say, all right, we did talk about this, and this makes sense, and this is why we decided that, because other people will challenge that. There's all the time, people want to be backseat drivers when it comes to advanced directives too.
And family members, particularly around mom and dad, can have different points of view.
Yes. And they might have had different conversations along the way too. And they might say, no, mom definitely didn't want this. And well, I talked to her about it, and she definitely. So to have it written down is really, it's the, those recent commercials with the, throw the red flag and go to the review. Let's challenge that and go to the review and see what it really says. And then you can, it is such a gift to not have to worry about what we think the choice might have been.
Again, I always talk about my family a little bit, and my mother, I knew it, and my dad, we had the conversations of like, we want to actually live. If we've got to be on machines and things like that, I knew they didn't want to do it. And towards the end, my mom, I was told, we could have sent her back to the hospital, and they could have put nutrition into her, right, through forced tubings. And I just knew she didn't want that. And I was a healthcare proxy. I did talk to her sister. I included all the family members that were pertinent to the conversation. And we all said, she would not want this. She's made up her mind without telling us so much by her actions. And we chose to just, let her go the way that she wanted to go. Was it simple? It was probably simple. Was it easy? No, it was hard as heck. I mean, it was something I struggled with for 3 or 4 days. But I knew that that's what she wanted, regardless of what I felt about it.
And there's where you're kind of leaning into there reminds me of why we have on the hospice team social workers and spiritual counselors, because there's a lot of difficulty in, even though what the decision they want to have happen, there's still a lot of feelings going on in there about, is this the right thing to do? And if we do this, it does mean that the disease is going to continue, and it's going to, whatever's going to happen with the disease is going to happen. And usually that's someone passing away. But we got to remember that not too long ago, there used to be this thing called, dying from natural causes. And natural causes used to be the things that we say died after a furious battle with, and dealing with this for decades and years. So it's okay to say someone just, had passed away from natural causes, and natural causes could be something like heart disease, because hearts don't last forever, livers don't last forever, kidneys, any of your major organs aren't designed to go forever. To go ahead and yield to the march of time, I don't think we kind of acknowledge it as much as we used to anymore. And so there's a little bit to be said.
We are living longer
there.
than we used to.
That's true.
Much longer.
Yes.
Right.
So we want to, and that's the thing, is we want to, do what we can that's going to allow us to have quality of life and comfort. But then there does come a point where the aggressive treatments that you could take become too uncomfortable, and quality of life is too compromised. And so it's tough. And that's why palliative care can help to guide someone down that road and say, all right, well, listen, this is what's going to happen next. And if you go ahead and try to get whatever procedure would be the thing that cures it, but now you're 92, what's going to be the outcome? Let's talk about what the quality of my life might look like. So it's about having those conversations so you can make, and this is what I talk about all the time, is you want to be able to make educated, informed healthcare decisions. But if you don't have all the information, can you really make an informed decision around what's right? So that's why it's really good for the palliative care to walk people down the road and provide them the options. And then the idea is to respect someone's autonomy, because people are going to say, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have that happen. And we need to be able to respect those choices, because they're in charge of their own life. So we shouldn't try to tell them what they should be doing with it.
That's a really challenging thing for anyone who's followed social media, is that telling other people what to do is pretty prevalent in our society right now.
Yeah.
We are getting close to the end of our time today, unfortunately, because we could talk about this probably for another hour and a half.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But I do want to make sure that you can offer advice to our listeners who may be dealing with these challenges at the end of life, for themselves or for our loved ones. What should be the first steps that they start to take to put themselves and their loved one in a better situation? Well,
I mean, the first thing you want to do is just feel empowered. You got to be a squeaky wheel when you've got a lot of these things happening, because doctors and facilities, they've got tons of patients, and you need to be an advocate for yourself or your loved one, and start doing some of that research. Find out who does provide palliative care, or if somebody has Alzheimer's disease, I'm constantly referring them to their 1-800 helpline that they have. That's a 24-hour helpline around the clock, staffed by volunteers. It costs $0. And if you've got a loved one who has Alzheimer's, you should have that number on speed dial. So it's all about having that information at hand so you can reach out and get more people involved. Knowledge is power, whether it's about your disease that you have or what's going to happen next in it. So, get educated, reach out to any organization that has that extra information, join support groups for those disease processes. The more you know, the better and earlier your decisions can be to really maximize somebody's ability to stick around longer. Because when you have those, we talked about those extra 29 days, those are days that you can have those conversations around, I love you, I'll miss you, I forgive you, do you forgive me? It's those conversations that really make a good death, which is great.
No, I had those at the end with my mom. I went from forcing her back into working to get better to just accepting, and the last couple of weeks were a gift. So
awesome.
Thank you for the gift, Michael, of your time, and hopefully some people got some great things out of this, and we're on to the car guy here on Sunday morning.
Fantastic.
I've been in the right place, but it must have been the wrong time. Said the right thing, but I must have used the wrong line. I've been on the right trip, but I must have used the wrong car. Headed in a bad place, and I wonder what's good for. I've been in the right place, but it must have been the wrong time. My head is in a bad place, but I'm having such a good time. I've been running, trying to get hung up in my mind. Just got to give myself a good talking to this time. Just need a little brain. security.